All right, it's That's Enough Out of You podcast. I'm your host, Bill Rader, and joining me as always is my co-host, Sean Kane. Sean, how's it going today?
Billy Braids, how you doing, buddy?
I'm hanging in there. I think we're doing pretty good with this podcast, Sean. Trying to grow our brand, trying to grow the name. We got a lot of stuff coming up.
We do, Billy.
Next few months. Yeah, tell us a little bit of when do you work? I know you got your white lab coat on, and you're brewing up some stuff in the.
Yeah, we got a whole list of projects, Bill, to build this show. But one thing is Patreon, Bill. We're going to be on.
Yeah.
So that's gonna be out very shortly. If people want to, get on our Patreon page and any donations they could give or anything, it helps grow the show, Billy. Helps get guests, helps with costs, the editing, and we're trying to get more, famous authors and really, good guests on, and we're going to try to grow this show. We're working on a blog, Bill. There's a couple other things we're doing that we want to, the vision that we have, Bill, for this show, we want to build it. We want to continue to keep building it and growing the show. So Patreon is one start. It'll help us do it. And, like I said, Billy, we just want to make the show better for the listeners, buddy.
Absolutely. And I think, people hear Patreon, they start to get nervous. They start to think, oh no, now I'm going to have to start paying for it.
Yeah.
We're never going to be, we'll never charge for this show. This will be, this show is always going to be, absolutely free of charge, but there'll be other things that we'll kind of offer as different bonuses and things like that.
Sure.
But that'll all be coming up. We still have a lot of work to do before that gets going, but, yeah, a lot of stuff going on. We're really trying to build our brand and build the show, and a lot of it is just based on the response that we're getting. If we weren't getting any response, if nobody was listening, we'd say,
we'd really probably be done, Billy. But it's just such a great response. Constant, back and forth with the listeners. It's just tremendous, and the fact that we had some big hitters on already, Bill, as guests.
Yeah.
And we got more coming up, buddy. The show is really, it's growing a lot more than I thought we were going to get to, Billy. When we first started, I didn't know we were going to get this far, buddy. But now that we did, I think we could take it to the next step, buddy.
Totally agree. Yeah. And there's so much great stuff on Patreon. I don't know, Sean, I don't know if you subscribe to anything on Patreon. I subscribe to a couple of different shows on Patreon, and honestly, it's most of them, they start at like $1. There's really, it's not, they're not asking for a whole lot of money, or, a lot of these shows, they're just asking, if you could maybe, just give something, whatever you can. And you get so much in return. And it's also good.
It helps cover costs, Billy.
It does. And you're supporting artists, you're supporting people who are putting their time and effort and creativity into bringing you entertainment, and at times we kind of get used to with YouTube and a lot of podcasts, we just kind of get used to this all being free, and it's great that it is. It's great that we have so much free content, but it also is nice every once in a while to help out these folks that are doing all this stuff. So, all right. Well, that'll be coming up. But anything else, Sean, before we get on to
I don't want to give too many details, Bill, but I'm working on a lot of different projects, Billy, and we're going to be, there's some great stuff coming up, in the next couple of weeks and months. So just stay tuned. We're all over social media. We're on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram. We're everywhere, buddy. So just look out for the information coming out, because we got some big plans coming.
All right. Sounds good to me. All right, we got a really good topic this week, a fun topic, Sean. It's one that was actually a requested topic by one of our loyal listeners and our good buddy, friend of the show, Angelo.
Yeah.
So we sent in a few weeks ago. He sent in a request for us to talk about what's known as the Montreal Screw Job. So if you are a wrestling fan, and I'm sure you've heard this story many, many times before. If you're not a wrestling fan, or even if you just haven't heard it, I will talk about it. But You've heard of the Montreal Screw Job, right, Sean?
Oh, sure. Who hasn't? Anybody. I was a diehard wrestling fan, just like you, Billy. So,
Yeah.
but at that time though, I was watching a lot more WCW.
Right, right. So okay, so let's get into it. So, I mean, you think about that, the name, it sounds like it's a mixed drink or something, or
Yeah.
French Canadian porn.
Yeah.
But but what it is, it's actually it was a match. It was a wrestling match. It was in November of 1997. It was at an event called Survivor Series, and I'll give you the sort of the backstory of it. So in 1997, a wrestler named Bret the Hitman Hart was the WWF champion. Now, I know it's called WWE now. I can't get sued by the World Wildlife Foundation, so I'm going to call it WWF because that's what it was. So he was a WWF champion in 1997. Now, at that time, WCW, which was World Championship Wrestling, was really the main competition for the WWF. They were going at it on Monday nights. They both had shows on Monday nights opposite each other. And at that time, WCW was winning the ratings war. They were rolling. They were in the middle of like 83 weeks straight of winning the ratings war.
And a lot of that, Bill, had to do with the fact that the NWO was so popular.
That's right.
Because that whole thing was going on with the NWO. And basically that was for people, who don't follow wrestling. That was basically, a bunch of people from the WWF coming into making it look like WWF guys were invading the WCW and trying to take over.
Right.
And it was a great angle. It was that got me back because I stopped watching for a little bit and I started watching wrestling again because of the NWO.
Yeah. And a lot of that, Sean, behind the scenes was the fact that the WWF was struggling financially. They couldn't pay these guys. So a lot of them were leaving the WWF to go to WCW, where Ted Turner, who owned WCW, was putting a lot of money into the company, and he was able to invest in these guys like Hogan and Savage and Scott Hall, Kevin Nash. Plus, there were a lot of guys who were originally in WCW, went to the WWF, and then went back to WCW. Guys like Ric Flair, Lex Luger, the Steiner brothers, a bunch of these guys. So they were all kind of going back to WCW, and the ratings reflected that. They were the bigger stars. They had the more exciting matches. They had the more exciting storylines, and they were consistently beating WWF. In fact, Sean, they were beating Monday Night Football at times, not regularly, but they.
Wow, think about that, Billy.
It's amazing,
unbelievable. I mean, me and you were there watching it every week, Billy.
Yeah,
we were so into it, and my brother at the time. I mean, it was great. We were watching it every week.
We did, and we loved it. So what was going on in WWF was Bret Hart. Again, Bret Hart was the champion, and he had been with the WWF since the 80s, the mid 80s. He was there for forever. And he had been basically a loyal soldier to Vince McMahon. And Vince McMahon was the owner of the WWF. So what was going on was WCW was trying to get him to jump ship along with some of these other guys. They were offering him a ton of money. And, a lot of what was going on was the WCW was offering these guys what they called guaranteed contracts. So in WWF, they didn't make guaranteed money. They made money either per appearance, or they made money based on the merchandise. And so if you were injured, or if you weren't a popular wrestler, you probably weren't making a ton of money. And so Bret Hart, he was getting wooed by WCW, and he was telling Vince that he wanted to stay. He wanted to stay with WWF, but Vince said to him, "Listen, I can't afford to pay you what WCW was offering," which was something in the neighborhood of like $2.5 to $3 million a year for 3 years, which at that time for a pro wrestler was almost unheard of, Sean. I mean, they were not making that kind of money, and that was guaranteed.
Yeah, that's the thing. The guaranteed money, Bill, that WCW was throwing around at the time was incredible.
Incredible. And then also he wouldn't have had to work as many dates as he did in the WWF.
Right.
So I think WWF, he was working in the neighborhood of like 300 dates per year. So imagine being on the road that much time every year. Whereas in WCW, they were saying he would only have to work like 180 dates per year, which was.
And Bill, we talked about this before when we did our last episode on wrestling. Even though it's fake, we know it's, but the thing is that it takes a toll on your body. 300 days, there's no off season, Bill.
Absolutely. And you're away from home. And
right.
Bret lived in Calgary, lived in Canada. He was Canadian. And his whole family was in Canada, and it was tough. I mean, it's tough on the marriage. He had he had kids. I don't know how many kids he had, like 4 kids. And his wife essentially was a single mother. She was taking care of all these kids by herself. He would come home every so often, but he never really stayed. And he wanted to change that. He wanted to reduce his workload, and he was going to make a ton of money. So what happened then was Vince McMahon said, listen, I can't afford to pay you that much money. Here's what I can offer you, though. He said, I can sign you to a $10 million contract, but over a 20-year period. So in other words, it would be, I think the first 5 years was structured so that he would be paid as a wrestler, it would be front loaded. Then the next 5 years of the 20 would be as an executive in the front office. And then I think the last 10 years, he would be sort of like an ambassador for the company. But of course, none of the years he would have been making as much money as he would made with WCW. And none of it, of course, was really a guarantee either. So Bret actually agreed to that because he wanted to stay with WWF. That was his home. That's where he wanted to stay. So he agreed to that 20-year contract and signed it. And then as that went on and was just losing money like crazy, they were in free fall. And Vince was like taking out loans just to meet payroll. I mean, that's how bad it was. He just could not afford, he was just trying to keep the company afloat. So he went to Bret and he said, listen, I have to break our contract. I can't afford to pay you even what we had agreed to. And he tells Bret to call Eric Bischoff, who was the president of WCW. And he said, try to get the deal that they offered you. So, I mean, you can see what's happening here, Sean.
Yeah.
Vince is looking to, he's looking to save money. He's trying to push Bret out pretty much. Bret still wants to stay. He wants to agree to renegotiate the deal. But in listening to Eric Bischoff, and Bischoff does a lot of podcasts, and the story that he tells a lot was he thinks that at that time, Bret's popularity was really declining and was sort of dragging the WWF down with him. And Vince was basically just looking for a way out. He just wanted to get out of that commitment and get Bret out of the company.
Right.
Even with that, though, Bischoff still wanted to sign Bret. He wanted to give him that 3-year deal. So Bret Hart actually decides, all right, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna jump ship. He wasn't happy about a lot of things that were happening with WWF at the time. So he signs with WCW. Now, he still had a few more dates left with WWF before his time was done, including that Survivor Series match, the match in Montreal. Now, I got to cover a few things, Sean, before I get into that match.
Okay.
First, a couple of wrestling terms. Now, Sean, do you know the difference between a work and a shoot?
Sure, absolutely.
All right. So a work is basically what you see on TV. It's the scripted matches, the scripted storylines, all that kind of stuff. A shoot is the behind the scenes stuff, the real life stuff, the things that you don't see. So, for instance, I mean, a shoot might be, if a camera or, somebody picks up something behind the scenes, it's basically, it's the business end of it. It's like what you would read on the internet about, guys going from company to company, or what one wrestler said about another wrestler. That's a shoot type of stuff. And that's a lot of what we're going to be talking about here. The other terms I want to talk about, and this one, Sean, a heel and a baby face, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Any wrestling fan does, Billy.
So a heel is a bad guy, baby face is all right. Next thing I want to talk about is there was actually a company that was filming a documentary about Bret while this was all going on. So the camera's following him this entire time. Like every moment of every day, there was a camera on him. And it wasn't a WWF project. This documentary was an independent project. And it was called Hitman Hart: Wrestling with Shadows, which was eventually released and showed some amazing footage from what we're going to talk about. And actually, you can still see that documentary on YouTube. It's on YouTube for free. You can go on there anytime and watch it. So, all right. And the last thing I want to mention before we get into the match is, so Bret is still the WWF champion, like we talked about. He had to lose the belt before he went to WCW because Vince didn't want him to leave the company with the belt and show up on WCW TV with it, which a couple of years earlier, Sean, you'll remember this, WWF women's champion, Alundra Blaze.
Yep.
She left WWF. And what happened?
Did exactly what you just said.
She showed up on WCW TV with it. She threw it in the garbage can.
Yeah.
On live TV, on WCW TV, rather. So
you see what Vince, there's no way Vince, he's in such a bad position on this. Like he can't let Bret leave with the belt. It can't happen.
And he was thinking, okay, Bischoff's going to try to do the same thing.
Sure. And at that time, Bill, the back and forth between the two companies was getting really ugly.
Right.
And like you said, the shoot stuff, Bill, was really getting ugly between the two of them.
Yeah. Yeah. And even though, I mean, you might be saying, all right, well, this is all scripted. It's all, the belts are just really props, right? But they still represent the history of these companies. And there's a ton of meaning to the fans, who the champions are. So
Absolutely.
It really would have damaged the WWF brand if Bret had done that, if he'd left with the belt and done something. So and the other thing is, the other part of this is that it would have been disrespectful from a performance standpoint if Bret had just left the WWF without passing the belt on to the next guy in line.
Exactly. And that's a big thing with those guys,
Right. Well, the next guy in line was a guy named Shawn Michaels. So another example of a shoot, Bret didn't like Shawn Michaels. They didn't like each other. In real life, they did not like each other.
And that goes on quite a bit there, Billy, in wrestling.
It sure does. And especially with these two guys.
Yeah.
Bret felt that Shawn Michaels was too crude. He was vulgar. He was sexualized. And Bret really believed that this was still family entertainment. He didn't want, he didn't like what was going on. And turning things from family entertainment into more adult, edgy, sexual kind of stuff. And Bret didn't like that. So he didn't want to lose the belt to Shawn as it was. And the other thing you have to remember is Bret was also very popular among the WWF performers.
Yeah.
His brother Owen was working with him, and he had two brothers-in-law that were working with him, British Bulldog and Jim Neidhart were also there as well. I mean, he was a really popular guy. All right, so let's throw all of these things together. And then the last thing is this match was to take place in, as I said, in November 97 in Canada. Now, Bret is Canadian, has a tremendous fan base in Canada. In fact,
yeah, really huge.
WWF ran a program where Bret was a heel in the US, but he couldn't, the Canadian fans were not going to boo him. So he was
never.
So it was weird. Depending on which country he was working in, he was either a heel or a babyface. So what Bret wanted to do was say, all right, listen, let's find a way for me to keep the belt in Canada, in Montreal that night. And then whatever you want me to do the next night on live TV, I'll forfeit the belt, I'll lose it. Whatever you want me to do, Vince, I'll do. So Vince is, trying to protect his business, his brand. We've got Bret, who just really wants to save face in front of his countrymen and exit the WWF on his own terms. And we've got Eric Bischoff, who just wants this all to be over so Bret could go to the WCW. All right, we have all those ingredients. We've got all these things going on. So now let's talk about the work, which is the match, which would become a shoot. and then somehow become a work again. So the day of Survivor Series, Bret shows up to the arena in Montreal. He's got his family with him, the camera crew for the documentary. Everybody's there with him. And Bret meets with Vince privately without the cameras to talk about the match. Now, the thing is, though, he was still mic'd up. So we still actually heard on the documentary this conversation, which is pretty amazing. So Bret and Vince talk about the match. They decide what's going to happen. They decide, all right, at some point, we're going to send some other wrestlers into the ring. It's for what's called a run-in. And they'll interfere in the match and it'll cause a disqualification. The belt can't change hands on a disqualification. So Bret gets his keep saves face, and then he'll lose it the next night. So Bret's happy. Vince is happy. Everybody's happy. They're going to script the match gets scripted. This is how it's going to go. It doesn't really go that way. So the match starts, and Bret and Shawn have an amazing match. So, I mean, Shawn, these guys are two of the best ever, right? They're two of the best.
There's technically sound. I mean, they were tremendous.
And this match was, I mean, it was no exception. This match was an amazing match. They go back and forth. Bret gets the advantage. Shawn gets the advantage. It goes back and forth, back and forth. Now, at some point during the match, Vince McMahon comes out to ringside. So usually, Vince was, I think at this time, Shawn, people realized Vince was the owner, but he never really admitted that on camera. He was an announcer. He did the interviews and things like that. So he never really talked about his real life position as the owner of the company, which was, a work. But we get to a point in the match now where Shawn Michaels uses Bret's submission hold called the sharpshooter against him. And if you don't know what that hold is, I'm not going to try to explain it, but just suffice it to say that Bret Hart made many a wrestler submit using this hold. He won probably thousands of matches with it. So the tables were turned. So Shawn Michaels has the sharpshooter on Bret Hart. And what was supposed to happen, the scripted part, the work, was that Bret was going to reverse the hold, and then a bunch of the wrestlers would come in and interfere, and then, Shawn Michaels gets disqualified and end of the match. What actually happens, the shoot, was that when Michaels had the sharpshooter on Bret, Vince McMahon starts yelling at the timekeeper to ring the bell. And then the referee also gets up and he starts saying, okay, ring the bell, the match is over, submission. Bret Hart submitted. There was only one problem. Bret Hart didn't submit.
Right.
So, I mean, this is
unbelievable.
Watching this live, and I wasn't watching it, Shawn. I wasn't, as you said, you weren't really watching WWF.
No, we were into WCW and the NWO stuff.
So Shawn Michaels gets awarded the championship. The fans are going crazy. They can't believe what happened. Shawn Michaels is acting like he doesn't know what was going on. They make him take the belt. He goes back to the locker room, basically with security, because the fans are ready to kill him. And then, Bret Hart, it takes him a minute or so, but he realizes, the boss lied to him. They basically stripped him of the belt and humiliated him in his own country. So Bret's standing in the ring. He's up against the ropes. He's glaring down at Vince. Vince is, to his credit, Vince didn't run away. He stayed there.
Right.
He was looking at Bret. Bret's looking down at him, and Bret spits right on his face. Now, believe it or not, this is a shoot. This is not fake. This is real. And really, I mean, for the first time, Shawn, in wrestling history that I know of, this was a match that didn't go as planned, or at least not as the guys thought it was going to go.
No, it was incredible, and I mean, there's been times like Hogan was worried with the match with Andre that Andre wasn't going to, lose to him. Right. And there was a lot of people that said if Andre didn't want to lose, he wasn't going to lose. But no, this is the first time that something like that really happened, Bill. It was incredible.
It was amazing. So Bret's standing there in the ring, and by that time his brother came in and Neidhart and British Bulldog, and I think Brian Pillman came in also just to try to calm him down because they knew he was going to go crazy. And Bret starts writing with his finger in the air, WCW, and he did that on each on four sides of the ring, so all the fans saw it. They knew he was gone. So I mean, the story really just starts here because he goes back to the locker room, and he goes and he's getting undressed, and it's what was amazing is that again the cameras were there and they were capturing a lot of this stuff. And Shawn comes into the locker room. Shawn Michaels comes in, and Bret says to him, "Shawn, did you know about this?" And Shawn Michaels says, "I swear to God, I had no idea. I had no idea this was going to happen." And I don't know whether you believe him or not, and we'd later find out he did know. But then Bret said Bret was going to take a shower. The camera crew actually left the locker room. Bret goes into the shower. And by some accounts, people say that the Undertaker was furious and basically stormed into Vince's office and said, "You better get in there and apologize to Bret." So Vince goes into the locker room, and Bret's still in the shower, and Vince is saying, "Bret, I want to talk to you. I want to talk to you." And Bret comes out, he starts getting dressed, and he says to Vince, "If you're still in this locker room after I finish getting dressed, I'm going to knock you out." Well, he gets dressed. Vince is still there. Bret walks up to him, punches him right in the jaw, and knocks him out cold. So, as I said, the film crew had left the locker room. They didn't know that, they didn't capture any of this that happened, but they actually did capture footage of Vince like stumbling down the hallway after this had happened. And then, Bret tells them when they go back into the locker room, he said, I knocked him out. And he actually broke his hand on Vince's jaw. Some other crazy stuff, Shawn. I know you saw the documentary, right, Shawn? The Wrestling in the Shadow?
Seen it. Yeah.
Do you remember the scene now where
it's been a while though, Billy?
So there's a pretty impactful part of this documentary where Bret's wife is in the hallway, and like Hunter, Triple H is there, Rick Rude is, a few other guys are there, and she's yelling at them, and she's saying, "You guys lied. You knew this was going to happen. You knew they were going to do this." And Triple H is saying, I swear we didn't know. We had no idea this was going to happen. And, the truth is there were only a few guys that did know that this was going to happen. Obviously, Vince was one of them.
Right.
The referee, Earl Hebner, was one of them. Shawn Michaels, we would find out, knew.
Right.
And then Pat Patterson and Jerry Briscoe, who were two guys who essentially ran the talent and creative side of the business. They knew this was going to happen. But basically, no one else knew. The announcers didn't know. Do you know who Bruce Pritchard is, Shawn?
Yeah.
So he's also a guy who kind of runs the creative. He would sit in what the gorilla position, which is like right by where the guys come in and out of the curtain there. He had no idea. In fact, he was yelling when this was happening. He's like, "Wait a minute, this isn't supposed to happen. What are they doing? What are they doing?" So he had no idea. And then, of course, none of the other wrestlers knew. And Bret, of course, didn't know. So I think the big question now, Shawn, and now that I've kind of told the story, is why is this a big deal? Right? Why is this such a big deal? Well, if it's all fake, if it's all scripted, what does it matter? What does it matter who wins the belt or how they win it or whatever? Well, for Bret, it mattered.
It matters to them, Bill. It matters to the wrestlers.
Sure it does. Sure it does. And especially for Bret, because this is a guy who had literally given his blood, sweat, and tears to the WWF. I mean, he was performing, like we said, an average of like 300 days a year for, almost 15 years at that point. I mean, he sacrificed his time with his family, his wife, his kids. He sacrificed his body. He rarely missed it. In fact, I think that he says he only missed 2 dates the entire time. And, all he really asking for was to leave on his own terms. He had really helped Vince to build this business. Vince had gone through a lot of tough times. Don't remember the steroid trial and all that stuff. And Bret stayed there, and Bret stuck with him. And Bret was absolutely a champion for the company. one of their biggest. So he was really just asking for, he just wanted to leave on his own terms. And he really didn't even want to leave. But, considering everything that was going on, he wasn't leaving for the money. He would have actually taken less money to stay. He just wanted to go out on his own terms. But and then you look at it from Vince's point of view. Bret really should have known his place. He should have done the right thing. In fact, Vince did that interview that, shortly after, where he uttered that now famous phrase, Bret screwed Bret. So whatever side you come down on, there's one thing that you can't deny, Sean, and that is that the Montreal Screw Job changed wrestling for good. It really changed the trajectory of both companies. At that point, the WWF would usher in what they call the Attitude Era.
Right.
Stone Cold would win the title, I think at WrestleMania. Pretty soon after that, he beat Shawn Michaels. The Rock started to become more popular. Vince would use this whole situation to create the Mr. McMahon character, right, which really led to one of the greatest feuds ever between him and Stone Cold.
Oh, that was classic.
Yeah, and it turned that company around. And if you look at it, WWF started a real steady increase in popularity, and WCW would start to not immediately, but they would start to decrease a little bit in popularity.
I think, though, Bill, a lot of that too was WCW hurt itself too. Well, like you said, like taking all these guys, they were taking all these big contracts on from the WWF, and I think they had a plan with the NWO, and it was so good originally, but they only had to basically, they had the whole thing with Sting acting like the Crow and everything, and then they had, the feud with him and Hogan, but then after that, they didn't really have a plan for what happened after that. And they started, when they broke up the NWO and groups and stuff, it just started to fall apart, and the popularity just plummeted.
Yeah, and coincidentally, the plan was around, that ended up around the same time as this thing started.
Right.
And then when Bret Hart got to WCW, first of all, a couple things. He broke his hand, right? So he couldn't wrestle right away. He had his hand to heal.
And he was a bad fit, Bill. He was a bad fit in what they were trying to do.
Well, he was a bad fit. They didn't know what to do with him. They never really found a good spot. In fact, Sean, could you name one Bret Hart WCW match?
No, because I can't. It was an awful fit. Like, was he NWO? Was he not? It was just they've trying to force him into it, Bill. Like, It was so forced. The whole storyline, it was terrible.
Yeah. They just didn't know what to do with him. In fact, he would show up for TV and they would say, "We don't have anything for you tonight, Bret." And they would send him home. And he would talk about that. He talked a lot about that in podcasts and interviews and things that he's done ever since. He just said how frustrated he was. He thought Eric Bischoff was an idiot. His career would eventually come to an end when he got kicked in the head by Goldberg in a match. And, he said he blames Goldberg basically for ending his career.
He's not the only one.
That's true.
And I like Goldberg, but a lot of wrestlers said that, Goldberg hurt them,
Well, he was a guy, they really rushed him. They rushed him along. And that was actually one of the things that kind of staved off the decline in popularity for WCW. Sure. They were able to push Goldberg, and he was so popular. He was just this monster.
Yeah.
He was running over everybody.
Everybody.
Beats Hogan for the title. And then that sets up the Starrcade where Kevin Nash beats him he beats Goldberg for the belt.
And they reunite the NWO.
They reunite the NWO the next night with the finger poke of doom.
Yeah.
Remember that?
Oh, sure do.
That was the same night that Tony Schiavone said those infamous words about, the WWF making Mick Foley the champion. And he says, "Oh yeah, that'll put butts in the seats."
Yeah. Yeah.
And when you think about it, Sean, that's probably where, if you think about like a line graph with the two companies, right? You think about the WWF going up WCW starting to go down. That's probably where they intersect, is that night.
Yeah, I'd agree.
I'd agree. Because it wasn't too long after that things really started to fall apart for WCW. Bischoff ends up getting fired. And WWF just goes on this explosive run where they just dominate. And then it ends up where, what was it? I think 2000 or 2001, WCW shuts its doors and they business, and Vince buys the company. Vince buys WCW. So I really think, despite the fact that this was kind of a taboo, this whole Montreal Screw Job was really a taboo thing, something that just had never been done before. Vince knew what he was doing. He really did.
Well, he did, Bill, and he brought, look where he brought wrestling from where it was with his father.
Right.
It was really just, nightclubs and stuff like that. And he brought it to an entertainment, national, international level.
Yeah.
But what he did there though, Bill, there has to be some kind of, like, these guys have like an honor, like among them, the word. And when they're going into the ring with each other and they decide, it's decided what's going to happen and stuff, there's got to be some kind of honor there, to do the plan, stick to the plan. And when something like this happens, like what he did, you can't really defend that, even though it worked out for him. That's the way I look at it.
I totally agree. And I think the biggest risk with something like that is that one of these guys could get hurt.
Yeah, exactly.
If you don't know what's going on and you take a misstep, you could seriously get hurt. But I think, in this case, it was done in a way that they knew, they pretty much knew Bret wasn't going to get hurt. I think that's why Vince said, all right, ring the bell right now, because Bret was in a vulnerable position. It was controlled. They knew what was going to happen.
Right. And I was never a huge Bret Hart fan. He was a great technical wrestler. Like, I know, but the character, like, I never liked his, like, mic skills and everything. Like, I just never, but I still think in this situation, though, I think what McMahon did, I just think, that was wrong what he did, but you can't say it didn't work out for him, because it certainly did.
Certainly did. And I agree with you, Sean. I was never really a big Bret Hart fan. I actually liked him better when he was in the tag team with Neidhart, the Hart Foundation.
Right.
But
I just think, Bill, what these guys just kept coming over to WCW, like, they just kept bringing in so many guys, and it was just like, it was just too much. It was just they had a plan, and then they didn't have a long-term plan. They only had a plan for the beginning of the NWO, really, and it just, I think they should have kept it at, ex-WWF guys. When they start bringing in WCW guys, and they just got too big, and, it was just better when it was just, Nash and Hall and Hogan, but they just got too big after that.
I agree. Yeah, it got to the point where WCW didn't really even have an identity anymore after that, because it was all just NWO.
Right.
And Eric has admitted that, Bischoff has admitted that on different interviews that he's done, where, he says, look, I screwed up. I should have made WCW stronger. I should have made them the baby faces and made them sort of the powerhouse. And it just got so out of control with the popularity and the merchandise. Everybody had an NWO t-shirt. Everybody.
And Bill, it sucked me and you in there. We were into it big time. Hall and Nash they were incredible. And that, that's the thing with them, is they were so good that they, even though they were trying to make them to be the ultimate bad guys, everybody wanted to root for them. And that was a problem, Yeah,
it was a huge problem. You would hear it in the broadcast. What was Scott Hall would say, who's here to see WCW, and you'd hear a few cheers, and then and who's here to see, and the whole crowd would say, and Tony Schiavone would say, there's a couple of knuckleheads out there, but
but for that time period though, Bill, when the NWO, it was great entertainment.
Mm-hmm.
It really was, but it all fell apart.
It did
destroy the company. The company ended up, that was it.
And then, they tried to bring it back in WWF, but that's just never really worked out.
And it would have been, how different would it, let me ask you this, Bill, how different would the NWO have been if, say, Shawn Michaels, they were able to flip Shawn Michaels to come to WCW?
I think that would have been something amazing. Because he was a absolute personality.
Yeah. And
He had the charisma
was,
to pull it off. Yeah,
he was best buddies with them guys, with Holland Nash, outside of the ring.
Yep.
So to bring him in and just have them with Hall, Nash, Hogan, X-Pac, and Shawn Michaels,
It would have been amazing. But, again, Bischoff has said in some interviews that I've heard that he never really had any interest in Shawn Michaels. And also Michaels.
And that's a problem, Bill.
No, absolutely a problem.
Because that's the guy that fits best into what the NWO was all about, what they were doing. That's the guy you should be going after, not guys like Bret Hart and people like that. Michaels fit perfectly into the NWO.
Yeah. But also, don't forget, though, Michaels had a lot of health problems, too. I mean, he had a back surgery. He took a long time off of wressling after that WrestleMania match. He really couldn't compete for a while after that. And he was also going through a lot of personal issues, drug problems, things like that. So, I don't know that it would have even worked out long-term had he gone, but
yeah, that's true.
He definitely was the better choice than Bret Hart. And there were so many missteps along the way, so many different things that could have been done so much better. I think a lot of people were pissed off about the finger poke of doom.
Yeah.
What was it? Nash and Hogan, where Hogan basically poked him in the chest and Nash.
And he knew something was up, Bill, the night before, because Scott Hall helped Nash win over Goldberg.
Right.
So you knew something was going to happen. And
yeah. And that had the potential to be something good too, until they screwed it up the next night.
Yeah.
I don't know. And then, of course, the whole Vince Russo thing. Vince Russo came into WCW. He was a writer on WWF, and they fired him, and he went to WCW and really screwed the pooch.
Yeah, he did.
He just made it basically a joke. I mean, talk about, we talk about the belt being a prop. I mean, he put he gave, what was his name? David Arquette, who was like a comedian or an actor.
Right.
Gave him the belt. I mean, come on. That's
ridiculous.
Ridiculous.
That's the guy. He's married to Courtney Cox, right?
Well, they were married. I don't think
they were. Yeah, I don't know. Unbelievable.
But, yeah. So there are just a lot of things that led to the downfall of WCW. And then of course, Vince buys WCW in 2001. Sean, what do you think? See, to me, what I think Vince could have done at that time, and who knows? I mean, he's the guy who knows how to do it, not me. But had he maybe marketed one of the shows as this is WCW, like he had, instead of Raw and
right,
a SmackDown, maybe it would have been Raw and maybe Nitro would have been a show that it just would have been all WCW guys, and then of course he could have rotated guys throughout. So at least he could have kind of kept both companies going, but I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. But I mean, McMahon is the best at what he does. You know what I mean? He built that business. I mean, whether you like him or you don't like him.
Sure.
He knew he had the vision and he knew how to build that business. And even when he was struggling, he got out of it. He dug a hole and he got out of the hole and he made the business successful again.
Yeah. And who knows what's going to happen? I mean, there's been a lot of reports recently he's going to sell it. There's companies that are looking to buy it, and who knows what's going to happen. But this was definitely a key.
Oh yeah, no doubt about it, Billy.
Key time in that story. So,
well, that was a heck of a job, Bill. You did good research on this one, buddy.
Yeah, thanks. Appreciate it. It was fun. This is the kind of story I really, that's when I first saw that documentary. I was so blown away by it. And that was a while, it was years ago, probably.
Right.
I don't know, 20 years ago. Was it 20 years? Maybe.
Probably, yeah.
Just incredible. So,
yeah.
All right, Sean.
All right, buddy.
that'll do it for this episode. But
Hopefully we made our buddy Ange happy, buddy. I hope he enjoys this episode.
hopefully, I'm sure you'll be getting some text and
I hope so.
messages.
'Cause he always got a good take on things, Ange will come back with something.
Yeah, I'm sure. Oh yeah, I'm sure I forgot something, or
And he'll let you know.
let me know. That's good. All right. Well, that's enough out of me.
All right, Billy. Good job, pal.
All right. Good night, everybody.
Good night, everybody.